The September sun hadn't yet burned through the morning haze when Lieutenant Evelyn Morrison stepped off the Humvee at Fort Bragg's Delta Force compound. 26 years old, 5'3", 118 pounds, soaking wet. Auburn hair pulled tight in a regulation bun. Steel gray eyes that had seen her father's funeral when she was 13 and hadn't softened since. She wore standard Army combat fatigues and carried a rucksack that weighed more than most women her size could lift. On her right shoulder, patch she'd earned the Hardway Ranger tab. On her left, another badge most soldiers only dreamed about, expert infantryman's badge. And on her rifle case, scratched into the polymer, 3 letters that would mean nothing to most people but everything to the men watching her approach. M-O-R, Morrison. 43 male operators stood in formation across the PT field, their morning workout interrupted by the arrival of what they had been told to expect. A woman. In their selection, for Delta Force, the first female candidate in the unit's 43-year history. Most of them had already made up their minds about how this would end. Master Sergeant Wade Kowalski watched from the compound entrance, 6'3" of Polish-American muscle and 30 years of military experience packed into a frame that looked like it had been carved from granite and wrapped in camouflage. They called him Hammer, not because of his last name, because of what he did to candidates who didn't measure up. He'd broken better men than her, bigger men, stronger men, men who'd bled in Fallujah and Kandahar and come home with medals and scars to prove they'd earned the right to try out for Delta. And now they were sending him a girl. Well, well, Hammer said as Evelyn approached. His voice carried across the field, meant for everyone to hear. This ain't a beauty pageant, sweetheart. Delta don't do diversity quotas. Evelyn stopped 3 paces away, came to attention, her eyes locked somewhere in the middle distance the way soldiers do when they're being addressed by a superior. Lieutenant Evelyn Morrison reporting as ordered, Master Sergeant. I know who you are. Hammer circled her slowly the way a wolf circles something it's about to eat. Let me tell you what I see. I see 5'0" of affirmative action. I see a political statement. I see brass somewhere thinking they can make history by sending me someone who's gonna wash out in 72 hours and make my job harder while she does it. Silence across the field. The morning had gone perfectly still. Do you know what the washout rate is for Delta Selection Lieutenant? Approximately 90%, Master Sergeant. That's for men. Hammer stopped in front of her. Real operators, Rangers, SEALs, Green Berets, the best of the best show up here, and 9 out of 10 go home broken. What do you think your odds are? Evelyn's eyes never moved. I'll let my performance speak for itself, Master Sergeant. Something flickered across Hammer's face. Not quite a smile, more like the expression a man makes when he's just found something he's going to enjoy destroying. Your performance, right. He turned to the formation. Thompson front and center. Staff Sergeant Garrett Thompson jogged forward. 6'1", 210 pounds, former college linebacker who traded football for the Rangers and never looked back. His hands were scarred from rope burns and calloused from trigger guards, and his neck was thick enough that his uniform collar looked painted on. Thompson here is going to be your battle buddy for PT this morning, Hammer announced. He's going to help you complete the standard Delta fitness assessment. Sound good? Yes, Master Sergeant. Outstanding. Hammer checked his watch. Assessment starts in 5 minutes. Better stretch out, Lieutenant. Wouldn't want you to pull anything important. The operators laughed. Not loud, just enough to make the point. Evelyn dropped her gear and began her stretching routine. Her movements were economical practiced. She'd done this 10,000 times before. In the corner of her vision, she could see Thompson doing the same, but his stretches were aggressive, almost violent. He was limbering up the way a prizefighter does before a bout. This wasn't going to be a fitness test. This was going to be a statement. 5 minutes later, they stood at the starting line of the obstacle course. 20 stations of pure suffering spread across 2 miles of North Carolina terrain. Rope climbs and wall scales and tire flips and mud pits and everything designed to break the human body down to its most fundamental question. How much do you want this? On my mark, Hammer called out. Ready, go! Thompson exploded forward like he'd been shot from a cannon. Evelyn followed her shorter legs, working double time to match his pace. The first station was a 100-meter sprint to a cargo net 15 feet high, stretched across a wooden frame. Thompson hit it at full speed, scaling it in seconds. Evelyn was 3 seconds behind her fingers, finding the gaps in the net, her body moving with practiced efficiency. Up and over. Hit the ground. Sprint to the next station. Tire flips. 8 tractor tires, each weighing 300 pounds, had to be flipped end over end for 30 meters. Thompson's superior size gave him the advantage. Here, his powerful legs driving each flip with mechanical precision. But Evelyn had learned a long time ago that technique beats strength when strength gets tired. She positioned herself at a 45-degree angle using her legs and hips more than her arms, letting physics do the work that muscle mass couldn't. By the 4th tire, Thompson's flips were getting slower. By the 6th, they were taking the same amount of time. The rope climb came at station 7. A 40-foot hemp rope hanging from a steel frame, no leg assistance allowed. Pure upper body strength. Thompson went first, hand over to hand, his arms pistoning like machine parts. 23 seconds to the top. Evelyn jumped, grabbed the rope, and started climbing. Her arms burned, her shoulders screamed, but her grandfather's voice was in her head, the same voice that had been there since she was 6 years old, the first time he'd handed her a rope and told her to climb or quit. The body gives up long before the mind does, Evie. Pain is just information. Are you injured or just uncomfortable? Learn the difference. She reached the top in 28 seconds, 5 seconds slower, but she'd made it. Halfway through the course at the log carry station, Thompson made his move. The logs were telephone poles, heavy and unwieldy. Each candidate had to carry 150 meters, plant it, and return for the next. As Thompson finished his first carry, he swung the log down hard right where Evelyn was about to step. She had to jump back to avoid having her foot crushed. Lost 2 seconds. Sorry, Thompson called back, already jogging for his second log. Slippery. Evelyn said nothing, picked up her log, carried it, planted it, returned. On her second carry, as she approached the planting zone, Thompson was there with his third log. He stumbled, or appeared to, and the heavy timber swung directly into her path. Evelyn dropped, let the log pass overhead, felt the wind of its passage, came back up, finished her carry, still said nothing. The pattern continued through stations 12, 15, and 18. Small sabotages. A foot that caught her ankle during the low crawl. A sandbag that mysteriously burst open as she lifted it, coating her in grit that got in her eyes. Thompson was careful, nothing obvious, nothing that looked intentional. But it was, and Evelyn knew it and kept moving. The final station was a 60-pound rucksack, carry full combat load, 3 miles at pace. Thompson shouldered his ruck and took off like he had fresh legs. Evelyn slung hers on, adjusted the straps, and followed. 1 mile and her left shoulder strap broke. The rucksack, suddenly unbalanced, tried to slide off her back. She caught it, redistributed, the weight kept moving. But now she had to hold the ruck in place with one hand while she walked, her other arm swinging for balance. Thompson had cut the strap. She was sure of it. Somewhere between stations, when she'd set her gear down, he'd found a moment. A knife. Made the cut 2/3 of the way through so it would fail under stress. Her grandfather's voice again. When they cheat, you have 2 choices. Quit and prove them right, or finish and prove them wrong. She finished. 2 hours and 47 minutes after she started, Evelyn crossed the final marker and dropped her rucksack. Her uniform was soaked with sweat and covered in mud. Her hands were torn up from the rope climbs. Blood seeped through her right pant leg, where she'd scraped her knee on the wall climb. Thompson had finished 12 minutes earlier. He stood with the other operators drinking water, laughing about something. Hammer walked over to where Evelyn stood, hands on her knees, trying to remember how to breathe. 2 hours 47, he announced. That's not bad for someone your size. Thompson here finished in 2:35. But hey, you completed the course. That's more than I expected. He gestured to her broken rucksack strap. Equipment failure happens. Better check your gear more carefully next time, Lieutenant. Evelyn straightened up, looked Hammer directly in the eye for the first time. Yes, Master Sergeant. Something passed between them in that moment. An understanding. He knew she knew. She knew he knew she knew. And none of it mattered because this was how the game was played. Welcome to Delta's selection. The barracks were worse. They gave her a private room. Not out of courtesy, out of necessity. The only female candidate meant she couldn't bunk with the men, so they'd converted a storage room into living quarters. 8 by 10 feet. A cot, a footlocker, a single light bulb hanging from the ceiling. She didn't mind the room. She minded what she found in it. The first night she opened her footlocker to find a dead rat on top of her spare uniforms. Someone had left it there, probably during the afternoon while everyone was at training. The rat had been dead a while, long enough to smell. Evelyn removed it with a trash bag, washed her uniforms twice, said nothing. The second night, her combat boots had been filled with shaving cream. She cleaned them, said nothing. The third night, someone had taken every piece of equipment from her wall locker, her spare magazines, her cleaning kit, her personal items, and scattered them across the compound. She found a magazine in the latrine, her cleaning rod in the mess hall, her grandfather's photograph, the one she kept in her footlocker face down in a mud puddle. She recovered what she could, cleaned the photograph carefully, placed it back in her locker, said nothing. The operators watched her the way scientists watch a specimen, waiting to see when she'd break, when she'd complain, when she'd go running to someone in command and cry that the mean boys weren't being nice to her. She never did. In the mess hall, they made a game of it. When she sat down with her food tray, the entire table would stand up and move to a different location. Every single time, breakfast, lunch, dinner, for 2 weeks straight, Evelyn ate alone, read her field manuals while she chewed, studied tactics, learned radio protocols, absorbed everything she could about the unit she was trying to join, and said nothing. Captain Brock Maddox noticed. He was the team leader, 33 years old, former Ranger Battalion commander, handsome in that sharp-edged way that came from too many close calls and not enough sleep. His file said he'd earned his Silver Star in Helmand Province doing something classified that left 3 insurgents dead and his entire team alive. He watched Evelyn eat alone for the 5th day in a row and felt something he hadn't expected to feel. Respect, not because she was tough. Plenty of people were tough, but because she understood something most candidates didn't. Delta selection wasn't about proving you were the strongest or the fastest or the most aggressive. It was about proving you could think when everything around you was designed to make you stop thinking. The hazing was a test. The equipment failures were a test. The social isolation was a test. And she was passing every single one. The shooting range came on day 14. Sergeant First Class Flynn Driscoll ran the marksmanship program. 39 years old, former Marine Scout sniper, 3 tours in Iraq, 2 in Afghanistan, and a confirmed kill count he'd stopped tracking after it hit triple digits. He had the weathered look of a man who'd spent half his life looking through rifle scopes at people who needed to die. He set up 3 shooting stations, 300 meters, 400 meters, 500 meters, standard distances for qualified marksmen. Nothing Delta operators couldn't handle. "Morrison," he called out, "you're up." Evelyn approached the firing line. They'd issued her a standard M4A1 carbine with an EOTech holographic sight, 30-round magazine, 5.56 NATO rounds. The same rifle every operator on the compound carried. 3 shots at each distance, Driscoll explained. "You'll engage on my command. Target is center mass. Any questions?" "No, Sergeant." "Then get into position." Evelyn went prone behind the rifle, adjusted the buttstock, found her natural point of aim, controlled her breathing, the fundamentals her grandfather had drilled into her 10,000 times. 300 meters, on your count. She settled the reticle on the silhouette down range, exhaled half her breath, applied steady pressure to the trigger. The rifle cracked. Paper tore. 3 shots, 3 seconds apart, all within a 4-inch circle at 300 meters. 400. Same process. Slight adjustment for bullet drop. 3 more shots. 3 more holes in the target slightly lower to account for distance. 500. This was where most soldiers started to struggle. 500 meters was right at the edge of effective range for the M4. Wind mattered here. Gravity mattered. The limitations of the platform started to show. Evelyn took an extra moment reading the wind flags downrange. A slight breeze from right to left, maybe 4 miles per hour. She'd need to hold just barely left of center to compensate. 3 shots, 3 impacts, all in an 8-inch group. The range went quiet. Driscoll walked down range with his spotting scope, examined each target, came back with an expression Evelyn couldn't quite read. "Decent groupings," he finally said. "For static targets, any monkey can hit paper when nothing's shooting back." He gestured to the other operators watching from the bleachers. "But you know what? Let's see how the princess handles a little pressure. Thompson, Driscoll, Patterson, you're up. We're running a stress shoot. Three operators jogged to the firing line, each taking a station beside Evelyn. All of them were qualified expert marksmen. All of them had killed enemy combatants in actual combat. New drill, Driscoll announced. 600 meters, moving targets, shoot-no-shoot scenario, 12 targets total, 6 hostiles, 6 civilians. You got 30 seconds to engage all hostiles without hitting civilians. Miss a hostile, you fail. Hit a civilian, you fail. Time starts when I say go. He looked directly at Evelyn. This is what actual combat looks like, Lieutenant. You ready for actual combat? Yes, Sergeant. We'll see. Targets. Downrange, the automated target system activated. Silhouettes began moving across the range at varying speeds. Some were painted to look like armed combatants. Others were clearly civilians. They wove in and out of cover, appearing and disappearing at irregular intervals. Go! Thompson fired first, his rifle barking in rapid succession. Evelyn tuned him out, focused on her own lane, found her first hostile target, armed figure, left side moving right to left, led the target slightly, fired. The silhouette dropped. Target 2, civilian. Hold fire. Target 3, hostile. Adjust aim. Fire. Drop. Her world narrowed to the reticle and the targets. Everything else disappeared. The other shooters, the observers, the sound of her own breathing. All that existed was the sight picture and the trigger and the millisecond decisions between life and death. Hostile, fire, civilian, hold, hostile, fire. The rifle became an extension of her arms. The targets became a problem set. Math and physics and muscle memory all compressed into split-second calculations. When the timer buzzed at 30 seconds, Evelyn had fired 11 times. She'd engaged 11 of the 12 targets. She'd been scanning for the last hostile when time expired. Thompson had fired 23 times. Martinez had fired 18. Patterson had fired 16. Driscoll called ceasefire and walked down range with his spotting scope. When he came back, he was holding a clipboard with the scores. Thompson, 7 hostile targets engaged, 6 confirmed hits, 3 civilian targets hit. Fail. Thompson's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Martinez, 6 hostile targets engaged, 5 confirmed hits, 2 civilian targets hit. Fail. Patterson, 8 hostile targets engaged, 6 confirmed hits, 1 civilian target hit. Fail. Driscoll turned to Evelyn. Morrison, 11 hostile targets engaged. He paused, let the moment stretch out. 11 confirmed hits, 0 civilian casualties. Time 28.4 seconds. Another pause. When we pulled the targets, every single shot was either T-box or high center mass. That means every shot was a guaranteed kill. No wounded, no suffering, just clinical, perfect execution. He held up one of the target silhouettes. The bullet hole was dead center of where the hostile's forehead would be. This is a 600-meter headshot on a moving target in a stress scenario with a carbine platform that most shooters can't even hit center mass with at this distance. Driscoll looked at Evelyn like he was seeing her for the first time. Who taught you to shoot like this? For the first time since she'd arrived at Fort Bragg, Evelyn allowed herself something close to a smile. My grandfather, Sergeant. Your grandfather got a name, General Robert Morrison. The name hit the range like a physical force. Every operator within earshot went still. They all knew that name. Desert Storm, the legendary sniper who'd racked up 127 confirmed kills as a company commander. The man who'd earned the Medal of Honor for holding a position against 2 companies of Iraqi Republican Guard with nothing but a sniper rifle and absolute refusal to retreat. The officer who'd set the Delta Force marksmanship record, 1,156 meters, that had stood for 33 years. Iron Bob Morrison. Hammer appeared from the observation tower, his face unreadable. He walked up to Evelyn close enough that she could see the flecks of gray in his stubble. You're Robert Morrison's granddaughter. Yes, Master Sergeant. Why didn't you mention that before? You didn't ask, Master Sergeant. For a long moment, Hammer just stared at her. Then he turned to the assembled operators. Everybody out. Range is closed for the day. They filed out, glancing back at Evelyn as they went. The dynamic had shifted. Not all the way, not yet, but something had changed in how they looked at her. When the last operator was gone, Hammer turned back to Evelyn. Listen to me very carefully, Lieutenant. I don't care whose granddaughter you are. I don't care if your family tree is nothing but Medal of Honor recipients and four-star generals. In here, you're just another candidate. You're going to be tested. You're going to be pushed. And you're going to earn every single thing you get just like everybody else. Are we clear, Crystal Master Sergeant? Good. He started to walk away, then stopped. That shooting, though, that was something. Your grandfather teach you anything else? Everything else, Master Sergeant. Hammer almost smiled, almost. Then I guess we'll find out if everything else is good enough. The night navigation exercise came 2 days later. 20 miles of movement through hostile terrain in full combat load with nothing but a compass and a map and the stars overhead. Teams of 4, no jeeps, no night vision devices, nothing but basic land navigation and the ability to not get lost when everything looked the same in the dark. Evelyn was assigned to Team 3, her team leader, Master Sergeant Wade Kowalski, her teammates, Staff Sergeant Garrett Thompson, and Corporal Blake Hutchins, 24 years old, the youngest operator in the selection course. They assembled at the starting point at 2200 hours. Full darkness, no moon. The North Carolina woods were a wall of black interrupted only by the distant glow of the compound lights behind them. Hammer checked each team's gear, making sure everyone had the required equipment. When he got to Evelyn, he spent extra time inspecting her rucksack, her compass, her water supply. You got any questions about the route, Lieutenant? No, Master Sergeant. Any concerns? No, Master Sergeant. Outstanding. He lowered his voice so only she could hear. Your grandfather used to run this course when he was in selection. Finished it in 4 hours and 38 minutes. Faster than anyone before or since. Just thought you'd want to know. Then louder for everyone. First team to checkpoint Alpha wins bragging rights in a 4-hour sleep window tomorrow. Last team gets to clean the latrines for a week. Move out. Team 3 started into the woods, Hammer on point, reading the terrain with practiced ease. Evelyn followed in the second position, with Thompson behind her and Hutchins pulling rear security. For the first 5 miles, they made good time. Hammer set a brutal pace, pushing through creek beds and over ridge lines, with the confidence of someone who'd walked these woods 1,000 times before. Every 20 minutes, he'd stop, check his compass, adjust their heading, and push on. At mile 8, they took a break in a small clearing. Water break, Hammer announced. 5 minutes, then we pushed to checkpoint Alpha. Evelyn dropped her ruck and pulled out her canteen. The night air was cool, almost cold, and sweat was starting to freeze on her skin. She could feel blisters forming on her heels where her boots rubbed. Hey, Morrison, Thompson said from behind her. How you holding up? This must be harder than shopping at the mall, huh? She didn't answer, just drank her water. I'm talking to you, Princess. Or are you too tired to talk? Evelyn recapped her canteen. I'm fine, Thompson. Thanks for asking. Real sweet of you to join us on this little camping trip. Must be nice having a famous grandpa to get you special treatment. Hammer cut in. Shut it, Thompson. Save your energy for the movement. Just making conversation, Sergeant. Make it silently. 5 minutes later, they were moving again. The terrain got rougher, steeper, hills thicker, vegetation. Evelyn's legs were burning, her shoulders ached from the rucksack. But she'd been in pain before. Pain was just information. At mile 10, something changed. They'd stopped in another clearing, this one at the base of a particularly steep ridgeline. Hammer was checking the map when he turned to Evelyn. Morrison, I need you to do a quick perimeter check. Make sure we don't have any wildlife issues before we start this climb. Roger, Sergeant. She moved off into the tree line, scanning the darkness for any signs of animal activity. They'd been briefed about bears in this area, wild pigs. Better to check now than stumble onto something territorial in the dark. She circled the perimeter, covering about 50 meters in each direction. Saw nothing but trees and shadows. When she came back to the clearing, it was empty. Her team was gone. Evelyn stood perfectly still, listening. No sounds of movement. No voices. No radio chatter. She pulled out her compass, oriented herself to the last known heading. Then she understood. They'd left her. On purpose. She keyed her radio. Team 3, this is Morrison. Request position. Static. Team 3, how copy? More static, then Thompson's voice barely containing his amusement. Oops, thought you were right behind us, princess. Must have missed you in the dark. Hey, you know the way back to base, right? Just follow the stars or something. Good luck. Click. Radio went dead. Evelyn stood in the darkness alone, 10 miles from anywhere with nothing but her compass and her map and her grandfather's training. She could quit, key her emergency beacon, get extracted, go home with the very reasonable excuse that her team had deliberately abandoned her in hostile terrain at night. Or she could do what her grandfather would do. She pulled out her map, found her last known position, plotted the route to checkpoint Alpha. The direct route, the one her team would take, was 12 miles. But there was another route, longer distance but easier terrain. If she pushed hard, maintained pace, navigated correctly, she checked her watch. 23:45. Checkpoint Alpha was scheduled for 0300 hours. That gave her 3 hours and 15 minutes to cover approximately 14 miles. Evelyn shouldered her rucksack and started moving. The night navigation training her grandfather had given her since she was 12 years old kicked in like muscle memory. Navigate by the stars, there's Polaris, use it to find true north. Adjust for magnetic declination. Follow the terrain features. Creek beds run downhill. Ridgelines run perpendicular to valleys. Trust your compass more than your instincts, because your instincts lie when you're tired. She settled into a rhythm. Fast walk on flat terrain, slower on hills. Use your arms for balance. Breathe through your nose to avoid cottonmouth. Check your heading every 5 minutes. At 0130, she crossed a creek bed she recognized from the map. 2 miles from checkpoint Alpha. Right on schedule. At 0215, she crested the final ridgeline. Below her in a small valley, she could see the infrared chemical lights marking checkpoint Alpha. And gathered around it, sitting on their rucksacks, drinking water, and laughing about something, was Team 3. Evelyn could have walked right up to the AM, announced her presence, proved she'd made it. Instead, she did something her grandfather had taught her when she was 15. She found a position with good cover and concealment, approximately 200 meters from the checkpoint, with a clear line of sight to the entire team. Then she pulled out her personal camera, a small digital model she kept for documenting training, and started taking photographs. For the next 40 minutes, she documented every single thing Team 3 did wrong. At 0217, Hammer silhouetted himself on the ridgeline, making himself a perfect target for any enemy observation post. At 0223, Thompson used his white flashlight instead of his red lens, destroying his night vision and broadcasting his position to anyone within 2 kilometers. At 0231, Hutchins set his rifle down, pointed toward his own team, a fatal safety violation. At 0244, the entire team gathered in a tight group around the map, making themselves a perfect target for a single mortar round. 14 photographs total. 14 tactical mistakes that would have gotten them killed in actual combat. At 0258, Evelyn stood up, shouldered her ruck, and walked into the checkpoint. The look on Hammer's face was worth the entire 14-mile movement. Morrison, how the hell? Checkpoint Alpha as ordered, Master Sergeant. She dropped her ruck and pulled out her canteen. I took an alternate route. Hope that's okay. Thompson stood up, his face flushed. You were supposed to. Supposed to what? Thompson, get lost. Quit, call for extraction. Evelyn drank her water, not breaking eye contact. Sorry to disappoint. Hammer recovered first. What's your time, Lieutenant? 0258, Master Sergeant. Approximately 40 minutes before team arrival. That wasn't quite accurate. They'd arrived first. But they'd made enough noise approaching that she'd heard them coming from half a click away and adjusted her timeline accordingly. 40 minutes ahead. Hammer's voice was flat, unreadable. On an alternate route, by yourself, in the dark. Yes, Master Sergeant. That's actually pretty impressive, Morrison. Thank you, Master Sergeant. They finished the movement together, arriving at checkpoint Bravo at 0500, just as the sun started painting the eastern sky pink and gold. Team 3 finished third overall. Would have been first if they hadn't spent 45 minutes at checkpoint Alpha waiting and joking. The course ended back at the compound where all the teams assembled for debrief. Commanders from Delta were there, including some faces Evelyn recognized from her research. Major Daniel Crawford, the selection course commander. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, the Delta Squadron commander. And standing in the back wearing civilian clothes and a baseball cap pulled low, someone Evelyn's heart recognized before her brain did. Her grandfather, General Robert Morrison. 72 years old. Retired for 6 years, but still moving like a man 20 years younger. Steel gray eyes, the same eyes Evelyn saw in the mirror every morning, taking in everything and giving away nothing. He nodded to her, just barely, a micro movement that said, I see you, I know what you did, and I'm proud. Then Major Crawford called the formation to attention. Outstanding work, everyone. 96% completion rate on a course designed to break you. That speaks to the quality of candidates we have this cycle. He pulled up a tablet, scrolling through results. Top team time goes to Team 7, completing the full 20 miles in 4 hours and 43 minutes. Well done. Polite applause. However, I want to call attention to one particular performance. Lieutenant Morrison, front and center. Evelyn's stomach dropped. This was it. They'd found out about the photographs. She was about to get destroyed in front of everyone. She marched forward, came to attention. Crawford looked at her for a long moment. Lieutenant, you were deliberately abandoned by your team at mile 10. Is that correct? The team continued in movement while I was on perimeter security, sir. Yes. And you completed the course solo, arriving at checkpoints Alpha and Bravo ahead of your assigned team. Yes, sir. That's a 14-mile solo navigation in darkness with full combat load in under 3 hours and 20 minutes. Actually, let me check something. He scrolled through his tablet, then looked up at the assembled formation. The course record for solo completion was set in 1991, 4 hours and 38 minutes, by then Captain Robert Morrison. Every head in the formation turned to look at the back of the room where Iron Bob stood watching. Lieutenant Morrison just beat that record by 1 hour and 18 minutes. Silence. Then Crawford continued, but that's not why you're up here. You're up here because you also submitted these to my office this morning. He pulled up the first photograph on a large display screen. Hammer silhouetted on the ridgeline. You documented 14 tactical errors committed by your team during the exercise. You cataloged each one, time-stamped them, provided tactical analysis of why each error would result in mission failure or friendly casualties in a combat environment. Another photo, Thompson with the white light. This isn't just land navigation, Lieutenant. This is battlefield analysis. This is the kind of tactical thinking we look for in operators. Crawford turned to Hammer. Master Sergeant Kowalski, would you like to explain to the formation why your team committed 14 errors serious enough to get you killed? Hammer's jaw worked. His face had gone red, but when he spoke, his voice was steady. No excuse, sir. That's correct. No excuse. Crawford looked back at Evelyn. Lieutenant Morrison, did your team's abandonment make you angry? No, sir. Frustrated, no, sir. Then why didn't you call for extraction? For the first time, Evelyn allowed herself to look directly at her grandfather in the back of the room. Because quitting wasn't an option, sir. It never is. Crawford almost smiled. Dismissed, Lieutenant. Evelyn returned to formation. The other operators were looking at her differently now. Not with acceptance, not yet, but with something close to it. Respect. After the formation was dismissed, Hammer found her at the barracks. That was a hell of a thing you did out there, Morrison. Just finished the course, Master Sergeant. No, you finished it faster than anyone in Delta history, including your grandfather. And then you made me and my team look like amateurs in front of the entire command structure. He stepped closer. I owe you an apology. I've been testing you since you got here, making things harder than they needed to be, trying to break you. He paused. I was wrong. You were doing your job, Master Sergeant. My job is to find the best operators. Not to break good ones because I've got outdated ideas about who can do this work. He extended his hand. You've earned your place here, Lieutenant. I'm sorry I made you prove it the hard way. Evelyn shook his hand. The hard way is the only way that means anything, Master Sergeant. After Hammer left, Evelyn had found her grandfather waiting outside the barracks. They didn't hug. Morrison family didn't do public displays, but Robert's hand on her shoulder said everything that needed saying. You beat my record, Evie. I had a good teacher. You had a stubborn teacher who pushed you too hard for too long. His eyes were bright. Your father would be proud. I know I am. Grandpa, what are you doing here? You said you'd stay away until after selection. I lied. Robert glanced around, making sure they were alone. There's something coming, Evelyn, a mission. Something I've been working on for 13 years. Something that's going to test every single thing I've ever taught you. What kind of mission? The kind that's going to ask you to make a shot I couldn't make, at a distance I never reached, against a target that, he paused, against the man who killed your father. Evelyn went very still. You found him. I found him, and I'm going to make sure you're ready when the time comes. And he started to walk away, then turned back. That record you broke today, that was just the beginning, Evie. What's coming next is going to be harder than anything you faced. Harder than the hazing, harder than the training, harder than anything you can imagine. I'm ready, Grandpa. I know you are. That's why I'm here. He disappeared into the growing darkness, leaving Evelyn alone with a question she couldn't answer yet. What kind of shot was her grandfather talking about? And why did she have the feeling that everything, the selection, the training, even the hazing had all been preparation for a single moment she didn't even know was coming? The answer would come soon enough, but first she had to finish selection and prove one more time that being underestimated was the best advantage she'd ever have. 3 weeks after the night navigation exercise, Evelyn Morrison earned her place in Delta Force. Not because they lowered the standards, not because of her grandfather's name, but because she'd outperformed 60% of the male candidates and matched the rest in every metric that mattered. The official ceremony was small, no press, no cameras. Just the 27 candidates who'd made it through selection, standing in formation, while Lieutenant Colonel Webb read their names and handed them the subdued insignia that marked them as operators in the most elite unit in the American military. When he called her name, the applause was genuine. Even Thompson clapped. Even Hammer, standing at attention in the back row, allowed himself the smallest nod of approval. But Evelyn barely heard any of it, because standing next to Colonel Webb, wearing his old dress uniform with the Medal of Honor ribbon prominent above his left pocket, was her grandfather. And the look on his face told her that the real work was just beginning. After the ceremony, after the congratulations and the mandatory photographs, Robert Morrison pulled his granddaughter aside. Walk with me. They left the compound, heading toward the training ranges that stretched across the eastern section of Fort Bragg. The September afternoon was cooling into evening, the sun hanging low and orange over the pine trees. Robert walked in silence for nearly 5 minutes before he spoke. What I'm about to tell you is classified at a level that doesn't officially exist. If you repeat it to anyone at all, I'll deny ever saying it, and you'll spend the rest of your career in Leavenworth. Understood? Yes, sir. Don't call me sir right now, Evie. Right now I'm not a general. I'm just your grandfather. And I'm about to ask you to do something that might get you killed. They reached Range 19, the long-distance precision range where Delta snipers practice shots beyond 1,000 meters. Robert pulled a set of keys from his pocket and unlocked the range shed. Inside, resting in a custom case, was a rifle Evelyn had seen in photographs, but never in person. A Remington 700 heavily modified, chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. The stock was custom walnut, worn smooth from decades of use. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender, the kind of optic that cost more than most cars. And engraved on the receiver in letters so small you had to squint to read them were 3 words. For Jimmy, Dad. This was supposed to be your father's, Robert said quietly. I built it for him after he made Delta. Custom everything. Took me 2 years to get all the parts exactly right. I was going to give it to him on his 35th birthday. He opened the case, running his fingers along the stock. He died 6 weeks before that birthday. In Afghanistan, during an operation that's still classified. He was 847 meters from his target. He had the shot lined up. His spotter gave him the wrong wind call. The bullet missed by 6 inches. Robert's jaw clenched. The target was a man named Ahmad al-Rashid, ISIS commander. The same man who 30 seconds after your father missed that shot fired an RPG that killed your father and 3 other operators. Evelyn had heard pieces of this story over the years, but never the details, never the specifics. Her mother had been told her father died in combat. Honorable. Heroic. All the words they use when they don't want to tell you the truth. For 13 years, Evie, I've been hunting al-Rashid, not officially. Can't be official. He's moved between Syria and Iraq so many times that any sanctioned operation would trigger international incidents we can't afford. But I've been tracking him, learning his patterns, waiting for the right moment. Robert lifted the rifle from its case. 3 days ago, our intelligence assets confirmed al-Rashid is holed up in a compound in the Syrian desert. Small force, maybe a dozen fighters. He's meeting with what's left of ISIS leadership planning something big. We have a 72-hour window before he moves again. He handed the rifle to Evelyn. JSOC is putting together a direct action mission. 8 operators. Surgical strike. Get in, eliminate the HVT, get out. No air support, no QRF. Completely deniable if anything goes wrong. Evelyn held the rifle, feeling its weight. Perfectly balanced. Built by a grandfather for a son who never got to carry it. Why are you telling me this? Because the compound is in a location where the only viable overwatch position is 1,400 meters away. Maybe further depending on final approach routes. That's beyond the effective range of standard platforms. Beyond what most snipers can reliably hit even on a range. He met her eyes. I need someone who can make a shot at 1,400 meters in combat conditions with zero margin for error. I need someone who won't miss when it counts, and there's only one person I trust to make that shot. You want me on the mission. I want you to be the mission. Everything else, the assault team, the planning, the extraction, it's all secondary. The primary objective is one shot, one kill, the man who murdered your father. Evelyn looked down at the rifle in her hands, her father's rifle. Never fired, waiting 13 years for this moment. When do we leave? Robert almost smiled. Knew you'd say yes. That's why I already added you to the roster. 48 hours later, Evelyn was sitting in a briefing room with 7 other Delta operators looking at satellite imagery of a compound in the middle of nowhere, Syria. Captain Brock Maddox ran the brief. He'd been selected as team leader based on his experience running direct action missions in Mosul and Raqqa. Cool under pressure, good tactical mind, the kind of officer who led from the front and brought his people home alive. Target is here. He pointed to a 2-story stone building surrounded by a low wall, 10 miles south of Raqqa, middle of the desert. Nearest civilian population is 6 clicks away. The satellite image showed a structure that looked like it had been there for centuries. Thick walls, small windows, defensible position. Intel says al-Rashid is meeting with 5 to 7 ISIS leadership personnel plus security. We're estimating 12 to 15 total combatants, all experienced fighters, all well armed. Maddox pulled up a topographical map. Approach route is from the northwest, 8 kilometers of foot movement through open desert. No cover, no concealment. We'll move at night, use the terrain as best we can, but this is going to be exposed. He zoomed in on a ridge approximately 1,500 meters from the compound. Our primary overwatch position is here. Morrison, that's you. You'll establish position 90 minutes before the assault. Provide real-time intelligence on enemy movements and numbers. When we breach, you'll engage targets of opportunity. Evelyn studied the map. The ridge was good high ground, clear line of sight, but the distance was extreme. Confirmed range to target, she asked. 1,437 meters from the ridge to the compound's center courtyard. Longer to the rooftop positions. Maddox looked at her. That going to be a problem, Lieutenant? No, sir. Hammer, who was assigned as the primary breacher, spoke up. With respect, Captain, that's nearly a mile. In combat conditions. With variables we can't predict. Wouldn't it make more sense to position Morrison closer? Maybe 700-800 meters. There is no closer position with adequate defilade, Maddox explained. Anything closer puts her in direct line of sight from the compound. They'd spot her during setup. The ridge is the only option. He turned back to Evelyn. Your grandfather says you can make this shot. I'm trusting his judgment. But I need you to be honest with me, Lieutenant. Can you make this shot? Evelyn thought about the thousands of hours on the range with her grandfather. The endless drills, the calculations she'd memorized until they became instinct. The voice in her head that had guided her through every difficult shot she'd ever taken. I can make it, sir. Good, because if you can't, if al-Rashid gets away again, we won't get another chance. This is it. The mission brief continued for another 2 hours. Exfiltration routes, communication protocols, contingency plans for every scenario they could imagine. By the time they finished, Evelyn had the entire operation mapped in her mind. That night, unable to sleep, she went to the range. Found her grandfather already there setting up targets at extended distances. Figured you'd show up, he said. Can't sleep before big missions. Never could. He'd placed targets at 1,400 meters, exactly the distance she'd be shooting in Syria. Walk me through your setup, he said. Pretend I'm watching over your shoulder. Tell me everything you're thinking. Evelyn got into position behind the Remington 700, settled the stock against her shoulder, found her natural point of aim. Wind is the biggest variable, she began. In the desert, thermal activity is going to create mirage. It'll distort my sight picture, make distance estimation harder. I'll need to read the mirage to determine wind speed and direction at multiple points between me and the target. Go on. Temperature affects bullet velocity. Hotter air is less dense, less resistance, flatter trajectory, but it also affects the powder burn rate. The rifle will shoot slightly faster in heat. She adjusted the scope's parallax. Elevation calculation is straightforward. 1,437 meters with a 300 Win Mag, I'm looking at approximately 11.4 mils of elevation adjusted for temperature and altitude. What about Coriolis effect? At this distance with an east-west shot, Coriolis drift is approximately 0.5 mils right. I'll need to hold slightly left to compensate. Robert nodded. Time of flight, roughly 2.3 seconds from trigger press to impact. That's an eternity in combat. If the target moves, I need to lead. And if your first shot misses, Evelyn looked up from the scope. It won't. But if it does, then I adjust and fire again. But Grandpa, I won't miss. Not this shot, not him. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Your father said the same thing, right before he took the shot that killed him. The words hung in the air like smoke. I know you're confident, Evie. I trained you to be confident. But confidence without respect for variables gets people killed. Your father was confident. He trusted his spotter. He didn't double-check the wind call, and he died because of it. He sat down beside her. I don't want you dying because you were too confident to consider the possibility of failure. I'm not father. No, you're better. You're more careful, more precise. You check your math twice. That's why I chose you for this. He put his hand on her shoulder. But even the best shooter in the world can miss if the variables align wrong. So I need you to promise me something. What? If you miss the first shot, if Al-Rashid moves or the wind shifts or anything goes wrong, you take the second shot. You don't freeze. You don't doubt yourself. You adjust and you fire. Because that assault team is going to be exposed and they're counting on you to eliminate the biggest target. Understood? Understood. They spent the next 4 hours on the range. Evelyn fired 60 rounds at 1,400 meters in various conditions. Robert adjusted variables, making her shoot with simulated wind changes. Temperature fluctuations, even having her sprint 50 meters before taking the shot to simulate combat stress. By the time the sun came up, Evelyn had achieved a 73% first-round hit rate at extended range. Better than most snipers could manage at half the distance, but 27% of her shots had missed. In combat, 27% might as well be 100%. The insertion was textbook perfect. High-altitude jump from 28,000 feet freefall to 5,000 shoot deployment in the darkness over the Syrian desert. The team landed 3 kilometers from the objective rally point, consolidated, and began movement. The desert at night was surprisingly cold. Evelyn's breath came in small clouds as she moved with her team across terrain that looked like the surface of an alien planet. Nothing but sand and rocks in the distant glow of Raqqa on the horizon. They reached the ORP at 0200 hours. 8 operators black on black, invisible in the darkness. Maddox gathered them in a shallow wadi that provided minimal concealment. Comms check. Each operator checked in on the encrypted radio net. All green. Morrison, you've got 90 minutes to get into position and set up. We'll move to our assault position at 0330. Breach is scheduled for 0400 right before sunrise. Questions? No, sir. Then get moving. And Morrison, sir, don't miss. Evelyn moved alone across 1,500 meters of open desert, carrying the Remington 740 pounds of additional gear. Her night vision turned the world into shades of green and black. She navigated by terrain features, keeping low, using every depression and shadow to mask her movement. The ridge was exactly where the imagery showed it. A natural rock formation that rose about 70 meters above the surrounding desert, with good cover on the reverse slope and perfect line of sight to the compound. She established her hide site with practiced efficiency, cleared the rocks that might cause movement or noise, set up her shooting mat, positioned her rifle on its bipod, arranged her ammunition 10 rounds, though she'd only need one within easy reach. Then she began the waiting. Through her scope, the compound looked peaceful. A few lights burning in windows, two guards visible on the roof smoking cigarettes and talking. No indication they expected company. Evelyn pulled out her range card and began making calculations. Wind at ground level was approximately 8 miles per hour from the southwest. But wind at mid-trajectory, where the bullet would spend most of its flight time, was harder to read. She used her spotting scope to observe dust patterns and heat mirage. 10 miles per hour, maybe 12. Variable. Temperature was 89 degrees and dropping as sunrise approached. Humidity low. Barometric pressure stable. She ran the numbers 3 times, checking her math. Elevation 11.6 mils. Wind 1.8 mils left. Coriolis 0.5 mils, right net wind, hold 1.3 mils left. At 0300 movement at the compound. A vehicle arrived. 3 men got out. One of them walked with a pronounced limp favoring his left leg. Evelyn's heart rate spiked. She'd seen that limp in intelligence footage. Ahmed al-Rashid, injured by an IED in 2014, never fully recovered. He walked like a man whose hip had been shattered and poorly healed. All elements, this is Overwatch, she whispered into her radio. Target confirmed. High-value individual just entered the compound. I say again, HVT confirmed on site. Maddox's voice came back. Copy Overwatch. How's your shot looking? Evelyn watched al-Rashid disappear into the building. No shot right now. Target is inside. I'll update when I have eyes on. The next hour was torture. Watching, waiting, occasionally seeing shadows move behind windows, but never getting a clear picture of who was inside or what they were doing. At 03:55, 5 minutes before the scheduled breach, al-Rashid appeared on the rooftop. He was carrying something, an RPG, the same weapon he'd used to kill Evelyn's father 13 years earlier. All elements Overwatch. HVT is on the rooftop armed with an RPG. She didn't finish the sentence, because al-Rashid was doing something that made her blood run cold. He was aiming directly at the position where her assault team would be approaching from. Somehow impossibly, he knew they were coming. Abort, abort, Maddox's voice urgent but controlled. We're compromised, break contact, and the explosion came before he could finish. An IED positioned along the assault team's approach route. The blast lit up the night like a small sun. Thompson's voice strained. Hutchins is down. We're taking fire. Evelyn's scope found the rooftop. Al-Rashid was there, RPG on his shoulder, aiming at where the explosion had occurred. If he fired, the entire assault team would be killed. Overwatch, we need fire support now. Hammer's voice. We're pinned down. Range to target 1,437 meters. Wind shifting 12 miles per hour, quartering from the right. Temperature now 91 degrees, sun starting to rise. Target partially obscured by rooftop wall, only head and shoulders visible. Time to calculate a perfect shot, approximately 30 seconds. Time before al-Rashid fired his RPG, approximately 3 seconds. Evelyn's hands moved on pure muscle memory. Scope adjusted. Wind hold calculated. Elevation set. Breathing cycle started. Her grandfather's voice in her head, the same words he'd told her 10,000 times. The rifle doesn't miss Evie, you do. So don't. She settled the crosshairs on a point approximately 0.3 mils left of al-Rashid's head to account for wind drift. Exhaled half her breath, found the pause between heartbeats, and pressed the trigger. The Remington roared. The recoil drove into her shoulder. The scope picture bounced with the shot, then settled. 2.3 seconds of absolute silence while the bullet flew. Through the scope, al-Rashid's head snapped back. The RPG fell from his hands, tumbling off the roof. His body collapsed. The radio erupted. What the hell was that? Did Overwatch just... Holy shit. But Evelyn was already working the bolt, chambering another round, because there were more targets. A gunner in the courtyard firing an RPK machine gun at her team's position. Another fighter moving toward a second RPG. She engaged the machine gunner first. 1,412 meters, high center mass. The body dropped. The fighter with the RPG turned looking for where the shots were coming from. Found nothing but darkness and desert. Started to aim anyway. Evelyn put a round through his chest at 1,403 meters. A third target appeared. Fourth. Fifth. She worked the rifle like a machine, each shot placed with surgical precision. Breathing, aiming, firing. Working the bolt. Breathing again. In 4 minutes, she fired 9 rounds and achieved 8 hits. The only miss was when her target dove behind cover before the bullet arrived. The compound went quiet. No more muzzle flashes. No more targets. Overwatch, all hostiles neutralized. She reported, her voice steady despite the adrenaline screaming through her system. Assault element, what's your status? Maddox came back, breathing hard. We're good. Hutchins took shrapnel, but he's stable. Morrison, that was something else. Al-Rashid. Evelyn looked through her scope at the body on the rooftop, unmoving in the growing dawn light. Confirmed KIA, headshot at 1,437 meters. Silence on the radio. Then Hammer's voice filled with something that might have been awe. 1,400 meters. Jesus Christ, Morrison. Your grandfather shoot like that. Evelyn thought about Robert Morrison back at Fort Bragg, watching this mission through a drone feed from the Tactical Operations Center. Watching his granddaughter make the shot, his son couldn't. Better ask him yourself, Sergeant. The extraction went smoothly. Team consolidated at the exfil point. Helicopters appeared out of the dawn like angels. Evelyn was the last one on board, carrying her father's rifle, 1 round lighter than when she'd started. As the helicopter climbed into the Syrian sunrise, she looked back at the compound growing smaller below. Somewhere in that building was the body of Ahmad al-Rashid, the man who'd killed her father, the man who'd taken everything from their family. And now he was gone, not because of revenge, not because of hatred, because someone had made the shot that needed to be made. The flight back to base took 6 hours. 6 hours of silence punctuated only by the helicopter's rotor noise and the occasional status check on Hutchins, who'd been patched up by Doc Martinez and was complaining about missing the rest of the action. When they landed at Fort Bragg, the sun was setting. Golden light painted the tarmac orange and red. A reception committee was waiting. Colonel Webb, Major Crawford, a handful of senior officers Evelyn didn't recognize, and standing slightly apart from the others wearing civilian clothes and a small smile was her grandfather. The team assembled in formation. Webb inspected them briefly, asked about Hutchins, confirmed the mission was a success. Then he turned to Evelyn. Lieutenant Morrison, the ballistics team analyzed your shots via drone footage. Would you care to explain to me how you achieved 8 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,400 meters? I'd prefer to let the data speak for itself, sir. The data says you made shots that most snipers couldn't make on a perfect day at a flat range. You made them in combat, under pressure, with lives on the line. He paused. The data also says your longest shot was 1,437 meters, which, if confirmed, is the longest combat kill in U.S. military history. He let that sink in. It is confirmed, sir. We have helmet cam footage, drone footage, and ballistic analysis. Lieutenant Morrison's shot on Ahmed al-Rashid was 1,437 meters, confirmed kill, via cranial vault penetration. Webb looked at Evelyn for a long moment. Your grandfather's record was 1,156 meters. You just beat it by 281 meters. From somewhere in the back, Hammer's voice. That's almost a quarter-mile further. That's not just beating a record, that's demolishing it. Webb almost smiled. Agreed, Berna, which is why JSOC wants a full debrief tomorrow at 0800. They're going to want to verify everything. Make sure this wasn't a lucky shot. It wasn't luck, sir. I believe you, Lieutenant, but they're going to make you prove it. He dismissed the formation. Good work, everyone, especially you, Morrison. As the team dispersed, Robert Morrison approached his granddaughter. They stood together in the fading light, 2 soldiers separated by 46 years of age but connected by something stronger than blood. You made the shot, Robert said quietly. I made the shot. Your father would be proud. Evelyn's eyes were bright, but no tears fell. I hope so, Grandpa. I really hope so. I know so. He put his arm around her shoulders, and for just a moment, she let herself be 26 years old and her grandfather's granddaughter instead of Lieutenant Morrison, Delta Force operator. What happens now? She asked. Now, now they're going to ask you to prove it wasn't luck, and you're going to show them exactly what a Morrison can do when it counts. 3 days later, Evelyn stood on Range 19 at Fort Bragg facing the longest shot of her life. Not because of the distance, she'd already made that shot in combat, but because this time everyone was watching. The morning air at Fort Bragg carried the kind of crispness that made every sound sharper, every detail more vivid. Evelyn Morrison stood at the firing line of Range 19 looking downrange, aimed at a target so distant it was barely visible even through her spotting scope. 1,450 meters, deliberately set 30 meters farther than her combat shot in Syria. The Army's way of saying, prove it wasn't luck. Behind her, the observation area was filling up. Word had spread through Fort Bragg like wildfire. The female Delta operator who'd made an impossible shot, the granddaughter of Iron Bob Morrison beating his 33-year-old record. Everyone wanted to see if it was real. Major Declan Brennan stood beside the shooting position, holding a tablet with ballistic data from the Syria mission. 44 years old Irish-American with the weathered look of someone who'd spent 2 decades analyzing sniper shots from every conflict zone America had touched. Lieutenant Morrison, for the record, can you confirm the conditions of your shot in Syria? 1,437 meters. Wind variable 10 to 12 miles per hour from southwest. Temperature 91 degrees Fahrenheit. Target partially obscured. Time pressure approximately 3 seconds to shoot or mission failure. Brennan nodded, typing notes. In today's conditions, Evelyn checked her weather meter. 1,450 meters. Wind steady at 14 miles per hour from the west. Temperature 96 degrees. No time pressure. Static target. Harder conditions than Syria, Brennan observed. Yes, sir. Command wants 3 shots. Prove you can group at this distance. Prove Syria wasn't a fluke. He looked at her. Any questions? No, sir. Then whenever you're ready, Lieutenant. Evelyn got into position behind her grandfather's Remington 700, the same rifle that had killed Ahmed al-Rashid, the same rifle built for a father who never got to fire it. The walnut stock was still warm from the morning sun. She began her pre-shot routine, the ritual her grandfather had drilled into her since she was 8 years old, shooting cans off fence posts in the Montana mountains where he'd retired. Check the scope. Verify 0. Confirm ammunition lot number. Build the range card. 1,450 meters with a .300 Winchester Magnum meant the bullet would drop approximately 46 feet from bore line to impact. She'd need 11.8 mils of elevation to compensate. Wind at 14 miles per hour, full value from the west, meant roughly 2 mils of hold-off to the left. Temperature at 96 degrees meant the air was less dense than standard conditions. The bullet would fly slightly faster, hit slightly higher. Adjust down 0.2 mils. Coriolis effect at this distance, shooting east to west, meant the Earth's rotation would drift the bullet approximately 0.5 mils to the right. Compensate left. She ran the calculations 3 times. Each time the same answer. 11.6 mils elevation, 2.5 mils left wind hold. Behind her the crowd had grown. She could feel their eyes, hear the whispered conversations. No way she makes this. 1450 is beyond anything we train for. Her grandfather's watching. Bet she chokes. Evelyn tuned them out, found her breathing rhythm. 4 counts in, 2 counts hold, 6 counts out, 2 counts pause. On the pause between heartbeats, the trigger press would come. She settled the crosshairs on the target. A standard IPSC silhouette, tan-colored, barely visible at this distance. The mirage from the desert heat made it shimmer and dance. First shot. The breathing cycle. In. Hold. Out. Pause. The trigger broke clean. The rifle recoiled. The scope picture bounced and settled. 2.4 seconds of flight time. The longest 2.4 seconds of Evelyn's life. Downrange through the spotting scope manned by Brennan, the impact was visible. Hit, Brennan called out. Center mass approximately 3 inches high. Murmurs from the crowd. One shot proved nothing. Could still be luck. Evelyn worked the bolt. The empty brass ejected, glinting in the morning sun. She chambered a second round. The wind had shifted. She could see it in the mirage, in the way the heat waves bent and twisted. Now 15 miles per hour, now from slightly northwest instead of due west. Recalculate. 2.7 mils left. Elevation stays the same. The target hadn't moved, but the atmosphere had, and atmosphere was everything at this distance. Second shot, breathing, aiming, the pause between heartbeats. Trigger, 2.4 seconds. Hit, Brennan announced, 2 inches right of the first shot. The crowd was quieter now. Two perfect shots at nearly a mile. That wasn't luck. That was skill. And Evelyn chambered the third round. This was the shot that would matter. Not because it would prove anything to the ballistics team. They already had their proof. But because of who was watching. She could see him in her peripheral vision. Her grandfather standing at the back of the observation area. 72 years old, still standing like a man who'd never learned how to quit. The same man who'd held her when she was 6 years old and couldn't stop crying about her father being deployed. The same man who'd taught her that tears were fine, but quitting wasn't. The same man who'd built this rifle for a son who never came home. Third shot. This one wasn't about proving anything to anyone else. This one was for him. She found the perfect stillness that exists between moments. The place where time slows down and the world narrows to nothing but the crosshairs and the target and the absolute certainty that the bullet will go exactly where you send it. Trigger. The rifle spoke. 2.4 seconds of perfect flight. Hit, Brennan called, touching the second shot. 3-round group, 4.2 inches at 1,450 meters. The range erupted, not quite applause, not quite cheering. Something between awe and disbelief. 4.2 inches at nearly a mile. That was beyond exceptional. That was something that shouldn't be possible with any platform, let alone a bolt-action rifle in field conditions. Brennan walked down range with a measuring tape while the crowd waited. When he returned, he was shaking his head in something like wonder. Confirmed. 3-round group, 4.2 inches center to center at 1,450 meters. He looked at Evelyn. In 22 years of analyzing sniper data, I've never seen anything like this. Most operators would be thrilled with a 12-inch group at this distance. You just shot a group smaller than my hand. He turned to address the assembled personnel. For those keeping score, the previous Delta Force marksmanship record was held by then-Captain Robert Morrison. 1,156 meters, set in 1991 during training. That record stood for 33 years. Brennan paused. As of today, the Delta Force record is 1,450 meters. And the longest confirmed combat kill in United States military history is 1,437 meters. Both records now belong to Lieutenant Evelyn Morrison. Silence. Then someone started clapping, then another. Then the entire range was applauding, and Evelyn felt something she hadn't expected to feel. Embarrassment. She'd never wanted the attention. Never wanted to be the first female this, or the record-breaking that. She just wanted to be good enough. Good enough to honor her father's memory. Good enough to justify the faith her grandfather had placed in her. Good enough to make the shot when it mattered. Major Crawford stepped forward, raising a hand for silence. Lieutenant Morrison, you're needed at JSOC headquarters immediately. There are some people who'd like to speak with you. 30 minutes later, Evelyn stood outside a briefing room she'd never been inside before. The kind of room where colonels and generals made decisions that sent people to places that didn't officially exist to do things that never officially happened. The door opened. A young captain she didn't recognize gestured her inside. They're waiting for you, ma'am. Evelyn stepped through the door and stopped. The briefing theater was massive, capacity for 400 people. And it was packed, every seat filled. Operators she recognized from Delta, officers from JSOC, faces she'd seen in classified briefings but never met in person. And at the front of the room, standing at attention, were 3 generals. Lieutenant General Nathaniel Hayes, JSOC commander. 59 years old Silver Star recipient, the man who'd planned more direct action missions than anyone in the modern military. Major General Patricia Donovan, first female 2-star in Special Operations Command. 55 years old, Bronze Star with valor, a legend in her own right, who'd fought tooth and nail for every rank she'd earned. And General Robert Morrison, retired, 72 years old, Medal of Honor around his neck, the light blue ribbon standing out against his dress uniform like a piece of sky. Evelyn came to attention. Lieutenant Morrison reporting as ordered, sir. General Hayes stepped forward. Lieutenant Morrison, attention to orders. The room went silent. 400 people holding their breath. Then all 3 generals saluted her. not the casual salute of daily military courtesy, the full formal salute reserved for ceremonies and moments that mattered. Three officers with a combined 9 stars on their shoulders saluting a lieutenant. Evelyn's mind went blank. This wasn't protocol. This was impossible. Juniors saluted seniors, not the other way around. What was happening? Hayes held the salute for 3 full seconds before dropping his hand. At ease, Lieutenant. What you don't know, what we haven't told you, is that the mission you completed in Syria was 13 years in the making. He gestured to the large screen behind him. It lit up with a photograph Evelyn had seen before. Her father in full combat gear, standing with his Delta team somewhere in Afghanistan. In 2011, Colonel James Morrison was killed during a classified operation in Helmand Province. The target was Ahmed al-Rashid, then a mid-level Taliban commander. Colonel Morrison had the shot, 847 meters. His spotter gave him incorrect wind data. The shot missed. Hayes pulled up another image. An RPG impact. Smoke and fire. 30 seconds later, al-Rashid fired an RPG that killed Colonel Morrison and 3 other operators. The mission was classified as a failure. Al-Rashid escaped and eventually became one of ISIS's most effective commanders, responsible for dozens of American deaths over the next decade. The screen changed again, this time showing a younger Robert Morrison in combat fatigues, standing in a desert that looked like it might have been Kuwait or Iraq. General Morrison, your grandfather spent the next 13 years tracking al-Rashid. Not officially, not through normal channels, but he tracked him. And when he found him, he began planning an operation that required something very specific. Hayes looked directly at Evelyn. He needed a sniper who could make a shot at a distance beyond anything Delta had ever attempted in combat. A shot at range that would exceed his own record. A shot that would require not just skill, but absolute precision under impossible pressure. Robert Morrison stepped forward. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of 13 years of grief and determination. Evelyn, when your father died, I made 2 promises. First, I would find the man who killed him and ensure justice was served. Second, I would make sure no parent ever lost a child because of a missed shot again. He paused, and Evelyn could see the emotion working behind his eyes. I've been coordinating with JSOC since 2011. Every step of your career, every school you attended, every training course you completed, I had a hand in it. Not to give you special treatment, to make you better, to push you harder, to ensure that when the moment came when you had one shot at impossible range with lives on the line, you would not miss. The room was absolutely silent. The Delta selection process you went through, the hazing, the equipment failures, the night navigation exercise where your team abandoned you. Robert's jaw clenched. I authorized all of it. I told Master Sergeant Kowalski to test you to the breaking point, because I needed to know you could handle the pressure. Evelyn felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. You manipulated my entire career. I prepared you, Robert corrected. I made them test you harder than any candidate in Delta history. You think the washout rate is 90%. For you, I made it 99%. Every day was designed to make you quit, and every day you didn't. He stepped closer. The Syria mission, the 1,400-meter shot. That wasn't luck. That wasn't circumstance. I engineered the entire operation to give you that exact shot because I knew in my bones that you were the only person alive who could make it. Evelyn's hands were shaking. Anger and confusion and something else she couldn't name. Why not just tell me why the manipulation, the secrets, Because if I'd told you, you would have been shooting for me, for your father's memory, for revenge. Robert's voice softened. I needed you to shoot for the right reasons, for the mission, for the team, for the day that needed to be done. That's the only way the shot works. That's the only way you come home alive. General Hayes spoke again. Lieutenant Morrison, the shot you made in Syria didn't just eliminate a high-value target. It prevented an attack that would have killed dozens of American soldiers. We've since captured al-Rashid's lieutenants and learned he was planning coordinated strikes against 3 forward operating bases in Iraq. Your shot saved lives we'll never be able to count. He nodded to Major General Donovan. She stepped forward, holding a small wooden box. Lieutenant Evelyn Morrison, by order of the President of the United States, and with the recommendation of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, you are hereby promoted to the rank of Captain, effective immediately. She opened the box. Inside were captain's bars, polished silver gleaming in the fluorescent light. The room erupted in applause, but Evelyn barely heard it because her grandfather was doing something she'd never seen him do in public. He was removing his Medal of Honor, the light blue ribbon, the gold star, the citation for valor beyond measure. The highest military decoration the nation could bestow. He'd worn it for 33 years with quiet pride, and now he was taking it off. "Grandpa, what are you, Mom?" He placed it in her hands. "This was awarded to me in 1991 for actions during Desert Storm. I eliminated 127 enemy combatants over a 6-month period. My longest confirmed kill was 1,156 meters. I wore this medal with pride because I believed I'd done something exceptional." His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Today you surpassed me, not just in distance, in courage and skill, in everything that makes a warrior. This belongs to the best sniper in the Morrison family now. And Evie, that's you. I can't take this. Grandpa, this is yours. You earned it. And now I'm giving it to you. Not because you're my granddaughter. Not because you're a woman proving something, but because you achieved perfection when it mattered most." He looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Not pride, not satisfaction. Something deeper. "Your father should be here to see this. He's not. So I'm doing what he would have done. I'm telling you that you've become everything we hoped you'd be and more than we dreamed was possible." Then Robert Morrison, retired 4-star General Medal of Honor recipient, Legend of Delta Force, did something that violated every regulation in the Army handbook. He knelt, on one knee in his dress uniform, in front of 400 witnesses. "This is not military protocol," he said clearly. "I don't care. This is a grandfather kneeling before the finest soldier he's ever known. Not because of blood, not because of family, but because when 8 American operators needed someone to make an impossible shot, you made it." General Hayes and Major General Donovan looked at each other. Some silent communication passed between them. Then they knelt too. 3 general officers, 9 stars collectively, kneeling before a newly promoted captain. The room had gone completely silent. This was unprecedented. This was impossible. This was the kind of moment that would be talked about for decades. From the back of the room movement, Master Sergeant Wade Kowalski stood up, walked down the center aisle, stopped in front of Evelyn. "Ma'am, I hazed you. I mocked you. I sabotaged your equipment and tried to break you every single day of selection." His voice was rough. "You saved my life in Syria. That RPG was aimed at my position. Your shot dropped al-Rashid before he could fire. I owe you everything." He lowered himself to one knee. "I was wrong about you. I was wrong about women in Delta. I was wrong about what makes an operator. You didn't just prove me wrong. You showed me what excellence looks like." Then Staff Sergeant Garrett Thompson stood, walked forward, knelt. "You beat me in every test that mattered, ma'am. And you did it with half the people actively trying to make you fail. That's not just good. That's extraordinary." Sergeant First Class Flynn Driscoll, the sniper instructor who tried to embarrass her on the range. He stood, walked forward, knelt. "I've trained snipers for 15 years, ma'am. I've never seen anyone shoot like you, and I never will again." Corporal Blake Hutchins, the youngest member of the Syria team, still limping from his shrapnel wound. He stood, walked forward, knelt. "You covered our extraction with the most incredible shooting I've ever witnessed. 8 shots, 8 kills. While we were running for our lives, you were calm as a surgeon. Thank you, ma'am." Captain Brock Maddox, team leader, the man who'd led the Syria mission. He stood, walked to the front, knelt. "I've led direct action missions on 3 continents, ma'am. I've worked with the best operators in the world. You're better, and it's an honor to serve with you." Then the entire room moved. 200 Delta operators, Rangers, Special Forces soldiers, support personnel. They stood, they walked forward, and one by one they knelt. Not because they were ordered to, not because of protocol or ceremony, but because they'd witnessed something that demanded recognition. A soldier who'd faced every obstacle they could create and overcome them all. Who'd been underestimated, sabotaged, doubted, and dismissed. Who'd responded not with anger or complaints, but with performance that exceeded anything they had ever seen. The room was filled with kneeling warriors, all facing one woman who stood in the center, holding her grandfather's Medal of Honor, trying not to cry. Robert Morrison, still kneeling, spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. They're not kneeling because you're a Morrison. They're not kneeling because you're a woman breaking barriers. They're kneeling because you demonstrated something we all claim to value but rarely achieve: absolute excellence under impossible circumstances. He stood up. The others remained kneeling. When the shot needed to be made, when lives hung in the balance, when failure meant death, and success meant something beyond victory, you made the shot. That's all that matters in this line of work. Not your name, not your gender, not your politics or your background or who your grandfather is. He put his hands on her shoulders. Can you make the shot when it counts? My granddaughter can. And now the whole world knows it. The room erupted. Not quite applause, something more primal. The sound of warriors acknowledging one of their own. The sound of respect earned the only way that matters, through blood and sacrifice and performance under fire. Evelyn stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed, terrified, honored, and confused in equal measure. Her grandfather's Medal of Honor felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The captain's bars in her other hand felt heavier still. She'd come to Fort Bragg wanting to prove she belonged, wanting to honor her father's memory, wanting to be good enough. She'd never imagined this. General Hayes raised his hand for silence. When the room quieted, he looked at Evelyn. Captain Morrison, you have 48 hours of leave. After that, you're going to be leading the first female-commanded team in Delta Force history. Your team will consist of volunteers from this room who've requested to serve under your command. He glanced at Hammer, who nodded. Master Sergeant Kowalski has requested to be your senior NCO. Captain Maddox has requested to serve as your XO. You'll have your pick of operators. Build your team, train them. And when the next mission comes that requires the impossible, you'll be ready. Evelyn found her voice. Sir, I don't know if I'm ready to lead. You've been ready since you beat your grandfather's record, Hayes replied. You just didn't know it yet. Dismissed, Captain. The formation broke up. Operators filed past Evelyn, each offering a handshake or a nod or a quiet word of respect. Even Thompson, who tried so hard to break her, shook her hand and said, You earned this, ma'am, all of it. When the room finally emptied, only Evelyn and her grandfather remained. They stood together in the silence, two Morrisons separated by 46 years, but connected by something that transcended time. I'm sorry I manipulated your career, Robert said quietly. I'm not sorry for the result. You could have told me. Would you have believed me? Would you have trusted that you were good enough if you'd known I was pulling strings? Evelyn thought about that, about the doubt she'd carried, about the voice in her head that said she was only there because of her name. No, she admitted, I wouldn't have. That's why I did it the way I did. You needed to prove it to yourself first. Everything else was secondary. He pulled something from his pocket, a photograph, faded and worn. Your father took this the day before he deployed to Afghanistan for the last time. The photo showed a younger Robert, maybe 55, standing with a rifle. The same Remington 700 Evelyn had used in Syria. And next to him, a 10-year-old girl with auburn hair and steel gray eyes holding a much smaller rifle, both of them grinning at the camera. He told me to give this to you when you were ready, when you understood what it meant to be a Morrison, what it meant to carry this legacy. Evelyn took the photo. On the back, in her father's handwriting, for Evie, shoot straight, come home safe. Love, Dad. The tears came then. She'd held them through the ceremony, through the kneeling, through everything. But this was too much. Robert held her while she cried. The same way he'd held her when she was 13 and they'd told her that her father wasn't coming home. The same way he'd held her when she'd wanted to quit Ranger School. The same way he'd always held her, with strength and certainty and the absolute conviction that she was capable of more than she believed. He'd be so proud, Evie. I know, Grandpa. I know. 2 weeks later, Captain Evelyn Morrison stood at Section 60 of Arlington National Cemetery, the area where they buried the war dead from Iraq and Afghanistan, where hundreds of white marble headstones marked the resting places of soldiers who'd given it everything. She found her father's grave easily. She'd been here before, many times. Colonel James Morrison, 1975-2011, beloved father, son, and warrior. She placed 3 items on the headstone: her grandfather's Medal of Honor, the light blue ribbon bright against the white marble, A spent 300 Winchester Magnum casing, the brass from the shot that killed Ahmad al-Rashid, and her new captain's bars. "Mission complete, Dad," she whispered. "Al-Rashid is gone. The shot you couldn't make I made for you. You can rest now." The September wind moved through the cemetery, rustling the leaves of the oak trees that provided shade for the endless rows of graves. "They made me a captain, gave me my own team. Grandpa says you'd be proud. I hope he's right. I hope you're watching. I hope you know that everything I did, every shot I made, every time I didn't quit, it was for you." She stood there for a long time, one hand on the cold marble, the other holding the photograph her father had left for her. Behind her, at a respectful distance, Robert Morrison watched. He'd saluted his son's grave when he arrived. Now he just stood there, hands clasped behind his back, the posture of a soldier at ease, but never quite at rest. When Evelyn finally turned away from the grave, he was waiting. They walked together through the cemetery, past thousands of markers, each one representing a story of sacrifice and service. "What happens now, Grandpa?" "Now you lead, you train, you prepare. Because there will be another mission, another impossible shot, another moment when everything depends on you making the call that no one else can make." "And you think I'm ready for that?" Robert stopped walking, looked at his granddaughter with eyes that had seen 4 decades of combat and commanded soldiers in battles most people would never know happened. "Ready, Evie? You've been ready since you were 6 years old and I first put a rifle in your hands. You just needed to discover it for yourself." He put his arm around her shoulders and they walked toward the cemetery gates together. 3 generations of Morrisons have served this country. 3 different wars. 3 different kinds of hell. But one constant: when the moment came when everything was on the line, we made the shot. He looked at her. "You're not just continuing that legacy, Evie. You're elevating it. And that's the greatest thing a grandfather could ever ask for." They reached the gates. Beyond them, the world waited. Missions to plan, teams to build, shots to make that hadn't been imagined yet. Captain Evelyn Morrison, Delta Force team leader, the best sniper in American military history, took one last look back at her father's grave. Then she walked forward into whatever came next. Behind her, her grandfather saluted one final time, not to his son's grave, but to his granddaughter's future. The sun was setting over Arlington, painting the sky in shades of orange and red and gold. The same colors that had painted the Syrian desert when she'd made the shot that changed everything. Somewhere in that sky, Evelyn liked to think her father was watching, and she hoped more than anything that he was proud.